flying through the air are real.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh.
You gave an interview the other day in which you said you've been briefed on unidentified flying objects. Are they real?
We collected a lot of information.
The UFO reports were first investigated by a secret $22 million program.
The Pentagon declassifying 3 videos.
Something I had never seen in my life.
There exists a shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from law itself. Senator Daniel K. Inouye. So, what you're seeing right now is that we're definitely living in a different world today. What's sure is the world we once knew is gone. Not only are things dramatically changing around us, but people are changing on the inside. People are changing their thinking and their plans for their future. Look at how our world leaders are handling this outbreak. If this is how they handle this event, how are they going to handle anything worse? But a few strange things have been happening in the background of all this chaos, and I want to take some time out to discuss a phenomena that's familiar to most of us, but it's something I just can't seem to escape from its media bombardment. And that is the constant and never-ending ring of UFO sightings. I'm not a big fan of the mainstream news, but I use it to show you what they're putting out there for us to see. It is interesting to see them bring this up in an article entitled UFO sightings in North America jumped to nearly 6,000 in 2019. Peter Davenport, who runs the independent organization that's based in Davenport, Washington, said he couldn't explain why more people called about seeing flashing white lights, fireballs, disc-shaped objects, or other oddities in 2019. One of the mysteries of UFOlogy is there's a fluctuation in the number of reports over the years, he told ABC News in a phone interview. Some years it's been low, but it's gotten higher recently. One of the things people have always been wanting is the UFO disclosure. The government classifies everything to an extent to which we know for a fact that they have detailed information about what we're dealing with. People simply want to know what UFOs are, an official explanation, and one way or another, people will know the truth about what's been going on. So, let's take a look into this phenomena and see if we can figure out why the number of sightings may be steadily rising in today's world. The UFO phenomena of today started up somewhere around the early 1900s, and sightings of UFOs really took off around the mid-1940s. But it's been recorded throughout the entirety of history that many different cultures were seeing things in the sky. The Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, they were all experiencing the same type of phenomena. For most people, the question of whether or not we're alone in the universe is a mere philosophical musing, something of academic interest, but of no practical importance. Even evidence that we're currently being visited by non-human advanced life forms seems to many to be an irrelevancy in a world of global warming, crushing poverty, and the threat of war. Just when we thought 2020 couldn't get any more bizarre, the Pentagon declassifies videos of what they're calling unexplained aerial phenomena.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing! It's rotating.
Nickel 6-1 Tango, Roger, over.
Oh, got it! Woohoo!
Roger, there's troubleshooting as soon as I get
Did you box moving target?
602.
No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at that, man. Look at it fly.
3 videos of mid-air military interactions with UFOs were officially declassified and shared online on April 27th by the U.S. Navy. The footage, captured by U.S. Navy pilots in 2004 and 2015, shows mysterious wingless aircraft traveling at hypersonic speeds with no visible means of propulsion. UFO research group To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science published the clips in 2017 and 18. At the time, those videos were allegedly declassified. However, in September 2019, Joseph Gradishier, a spokesman for the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare, said that the footage had not been cleared for official release. Retired Navy Commander David Fravor was piloting the jet in the 2004 video.
As we both looked out the right side of our airplane, we saw a disturbance in the water and a white object, oblong, pointing north. This was extremely abrupt, like a ping pong ball bouncing off a wall. The ability to hover over the water and then start a vertical climb from basically 0 up towards about 12,000 feet and then accelerate in less than 2 seconds and disappear is something I had never seen in my life.
Harry Reid, former senator from Nevada and home to the infamous Area 51, tweeted, "I'm glad the Pentagon is finally releasing this footage, but it only scratches the surface of research and materials available." Right now, these videos will, for many, confirm what they've always believed, that the truth is out there. But why release them now, and what else might they have? How do you explain a whole fleet of unidentified UFOs? Who's behind the company called To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences that released one of the first videos published by the New York Times? What is a top-secret Pentagon program that's been conducting classified briefings for over a decade, analyzing various encounters between military craft and unidentified aerial vehicles? In order to understand these events better, we need to place all the right pieces together to see the bigger picture. Let's begin. December 16th, 2017. The New York Times reported that the Pentagon has finally acknowledged the existence of a special program that investigated reports of UFOs. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, the AATIP, studied various unexplained sightings. One of the associated videos released in August of a whitish oval object about the size of a commercial plane chased by 2 Navy FA-18F fighter jets from the aircraft carrier Nimitz off the coast of San Diego in 2004. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which began as part of the Defense Intelligence Agency in 2007 with funding of $22 million over 5 years, apparently ended in 2012. The $22 million spent on the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was almost impossible to find, which was exactly how the Pentagon wanted it. The program was the brainchild of former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid of Nevada, and it was headed by an intelligence officer named Luis Elizondo. Most of the money spent on the program went to an aerospace research company run by a billionaire entrepreneur and longtime friend of Mr. Reid's, Robert Bigelow, who's currently working with NASA to produce expandable craft for humans to use in space. In May 2017, on CBS's 60 Minutes, Mr. Bigelow said he was absolutely convinced that aliens exist and that UFOs have visited Earth.
Do you believe in aliens? I'm absolutely convinced. That's all there is to it.
Do you also believe that UFOs have come to Earth?
There has been and is an existing presence, an ET presence. And I've spent millions and millions. I probably spent more as an individual than anybody else in the United States has ever spent on this subject.
Is it risky for you to say, you know, in public that you believe in UFOs and aliens?
I don't care.
You don't worry that some people will say, did you hear that guy? He sounds like he's crazy.
I don't care.
Why not?
It's not going to make a difference. It's not going to change reality of what I know.
Do you imagine that in our space travels we will encounter other forms of intelligent life?
You don't have to go anywhere.
You can find it here.
Yeah.
Working with Mr. Bigelow's Las Vegas-based company, the program produced documents that described sightings of aircraft that seemed to move at very high velocities with no visible signs of propulsion, or that hovered with no apparent means of lift. Under Mr. Bigelow's direction, the company modified buildings in Las Vegas for the storage of metal alloys and other materials that Mr. Elizondo and program contractors said had been recovered from unidentified aerial phenomena. Researchers also studied people who said they had experienced physical effects from encounters with the objects and examined them for any physiological changes. In addition, researchers spoke to military service members who'd reported sightings of strange aircraft. The program collected video and audio recordings of reported UFO incidents, including footage from a Navy FA-18 Super Hornet showing an aircraft surrounded by some kind of glowing aura, traveling at high speed and rotating as it moved. The Navy pilots can be heard trying to understand what they're seeing. There's a whole fleet of them, one explains. Defense officials declined to release the location and date of the incident. When interviewed in the aftermath of publicity surrounding the AATIP, Reed expressed pride in his accomplishment and was quoted as saying, "I think it's one of the good things I did in my congressional service. I've done something that no one has done before." Reed stated that hundreds and hundreds of papers have been available since the program was completed, and that most all of it, 80% at least, is public, adding, "I wanted it public. It was made public, and you guys haven't even looked at it."
There are those who think we're on the edge of disclosure, that any day now they're going to open up the doors and show us the saucers or open the files. I'm not as encouraged. What about you?
Well, I don't think I'm even close to that. I think before we get to that, I think we need to do a little work, and we're not doing enough scientific research.
The idea of disclosure, have you had conversations with colleagues about the wisdom of letting all this loose? Is the public ready for it? Depends on what it is, I guess.
I don't think that Congress can make this decision on their own. They could try to pass a law, but that would create a lot more problems than it would solve, because there's a big public debate on this. I don't think at this stage would do a lot of good. Pentagon needs to get somebody within the Pentagon that's willing to do something that's a little different.
In response to questions from the Times, Pentagon officials acknowledged the existence of the program. Officials insisted that the effort had ended after 5 years in 2012. But Mr. Elizondo said the only thing that had ended was the effort's government funding, which dried up in 2012. From then on, Mr. Elizondo said in an interview, he worked with officials from the Navy and the CIA. He continued to work out of his Pentagon office until he resigned in October of 2017 to protest government secrecy in opposition to the investigation, stating in a resignation letter to U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis that the program was not being taken seriously. Elizondo said on December 19, 2017, that he believed there was very compelling evidence we may not be alone.
Do you believe that life from somewhere else, while you ran this program, came here, visited, observed?
I will tell you unequivocally that through the observation, scientific methodologies that were applied to look at this phenomena, that these aircraft, we'll call them aircraft, are displaying characteristics that are not currently within the U.S. inventory, nor in any foreign inventory that we are aware of.
So I know you're being clear, but I mean, the answer is yes.
I can't speak on behalf of the government. Obviously, I'm not in the U.S. government anymore. My personal belief is that there is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
In 2017, Luis Elizondo joined Dr. Hal Puthoff and another former Defense Department official, Christopher Mellon, who was a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, in a new commercial venture called To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, TTSA. They're speaking publicly about their efforts as their venture aims to raise money for research into UFOs. TTSA collects documents and physical materials from public and private sources related to the unidentified aerial phenomena, better known as UFOs, to study it, and then transitions the transformative technologies behind it to wider applications of public benefit. The company's consulting and research arm features top former officials from the Pentagon, CIA, Department of Defense, and Lockheed Martin Skunk Works.
Just a few weeks ago, the Navy admitted for the first time that several UFO videos were real, meaning they show actual area phenomenon that so far the Pentagon cannot explain. Now a UFO investigations group says they have found materials that could potentially be physical evidence of UFOs. Luis Elizondo is Director of Special Programs at the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. He also headed the Pentagon's Office for Investigating UFO Incidents, and is the star of the History Channel's Unidentified. He joins us tonight. Luis, thanks so much for coming on. So,
thank you for having me.
What is this material, and why could it shed light on the question of what UFOs might be?
Sure. Well, our company over the last year and a half has actually obtained quite a bit of material. And let me first preface by saying some of that material, its provenance is frankly hearsay, while the provenance of some of this material has been substantiated. And ultimately, we're in the process of analyzing this material at 3 different levels. We're looking at its physical properties, its chemical, or if you will, molecular properties, and then ultimately its atomic properties. And it's really at that point we'll be able to make some sort of definitive conclusion, keeping in mind that we still have to follow the scientific process and methods, and at the same time have peer review. So it's not just as simple as coming out and saying, hey, look what we found. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done.
I bet that's right, and of course you'll be challenged, as you ought to be challenged, I think. But quickly sum it up for us. Why do you think this material might be connected to UFOs?
Well, without getting into a lot of detail right now, because frankly, it's too speculative for me at this point to say why I think something. At the end of the day, it's going to be what the analysis tells us. And if you have, for example, interesting isotopic ratios that are not normally found, let's say, on this planet, then you have to scratch your head and either A, it's been engineered that way, or B, it came from somewhere else. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to find out.
So these are materials brought to you by people who say this is at the site of a UFO incident or a crash?
In some cases, yes. Again, unfortunately, I can't elaborate too much with some of these individuals. We do have non-disclosure agreements, but it's from various sources, both private and governmental. I think people would be surprised to know just how frequent and the volume in which these things are apparently recorded and observed by active duty military people on missions around the world, by the way. There's also some very interesting, I think, congruencies, some interesting relationships that are just now really coming into light for the very first time. New information that I think if people found out would be very, very surprised. I think some people might be a little bit apprehensive and scratch their head and say, wow, what does that mean for the rest of us? Other people might say, aha, I told you so.
A global scramble is underway to identify and perhaps replicate unidentified mystery material that's been collected in multiple sites around the world.
A few of the samples have defied analysis by leading scientists who say they don't know how the material was engineered or why or by whom.
Now, some of this meta material was allegedly collected in connection with UFO incidents, which gives the whole endeavor another worldly glow.
For years, one of the secret top-secret studies was carried out by Bass, a Las Vegas operation hidden within Bigelow Aerospace. Documents first reported by the I-Team show that Bass landed a contract with the DIA, and one of the objectives was to study so-called metamaterials, as well as futuristic technologies.
It was a multi-layered bismuth and magnesium sample. Bismuth layers less than a human hair. Magnesium samples about 10 times the size of a human hair, supposedly picked up in the crash retrieval of an advanced aerospace vehicle. Looks like it's been in a crash.
In Las Vegas back in June, physicist Hal Puthoff came pretty close to saying that this weird wedge of metamaterial came from a crashed saucer, but he can't know for sure. Puthoff and his colleague Dr. Eric Davis are on the cutting edge of attempts to identify an assortment of bits and pieces that are seemingly beyond anything we can create. This one sample is engineered in layers thinner than microns through a process unknown on Earth and for a purpose we can only guess.
We have multiple samples now from multiple sources, ranging a wide variety of integrity.
These days, former intelligence officer Lou Elizondo helps to collect and protect unknown chunks for the To the Stars Academy. Before that, he ran AATIP, the Pentagon's secret UFO study, the same one which released the now famous videos. This summer, To the Stars launched AATIP, its own effort to find and study pieces of material that may have been stashed away for decades after being retrieved from the sites of close encounters. Elizondo says there are legitimate reasons why the military and now private groups are in a race to figure out these materials.
In conclusion, here's the bottom line that we all have to realize and focus on for a moment, which is the fact we now have scientific evidence of a craft that defied the laws of physics and aerodynamics. In fact, it had some sort of anti-gravity technology to where it could just hover without any type of signs whatsoever of an engine. A rotor, wings, zero exhaust signature, no heat signature, and it was capable of accelerating instantaneously as far as the eye can see in less than 2 seconds. The evidence regarding the UFO subject is clear and overwhelming. It's not been difficult to make a compelling case for the reality of UFOs. But the greatest challenge is explaining why. Why all the secrecy? Why a black or unacknowledged government within the government? Why hide the UFO/ET subject from public view? There's not a single answer to all of these questions, but rather numerous interrelated reasons for such extraordinary secrecy. In the early days of the UFO phenomena, military, intelligence, and industrial interests had concerns regarding the nature of the phenomena, as flying saucers had been reported and photographed worldwide.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
And after it was determined to be an extraterrestrial, there were more questions to answer. Why were the ETs here? What are their intentions? How do the devices travel at such fantastic speeds and through the vastness of space? How would the public react to this knowledge? After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, it became apparent that the U.S. military needed to control who or what flew into U.S. airspace. The Battle of Los Angeles happened on February 25th, 1942 at 2:25 a.m. It was an example of an unknown aircraft that was immune to all anti-aircraft guns. The CBS radio news broadcast with Brian Palmer at that time described the events. Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the LA area, ordered by the Air Force Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Searchlights closely followed the object down the coast and kept it centered in their glare. Shells frequently can be heard bursting near the object, but none appears to hit it. The shooting stopped about 3:30 a.m. Approximately 20 minutes after the firing died down, the ship returned and headed westward from Long Beach to Santa Monica. The guns ran into action again, hurling round after round of shells at the object. The second barrage appeared to be closer to downtown LA, since watchers could hear the concussion of the guns more clearly, and the flash of bursting shells was brighter. Then, the ship disappeared for the second time over the ocean. The Battle of LA was the first time the U.S. military actually fired upon a UFO, but nothing could bring that object down. What was the U.S. military going to do to control this unknown threat? The next day, the military told the press it was nothing but a weather balloon. Another report was they fired at nothing due to war nerves. This was the first time official denial was put into motion regarding UFOs. The Army was not too pleased with these reports. If they couldn't bring down a weather balloon with almost 1,500 rounds fired in direct hits, then what would they be able to do firing at real enemy targets? What would happen if the public found out these things were real and there was nothing the military could do to stop them? The only solution was to deny that there was any kind of threat from something they had no control over, something they couldn't stop. The solution included an official denial that would last over 60 years. UFOs have been repeatedly investigated over the decades in the U.S., including by the military. But everything really began in the summer of 1947, at the dawn of the Cold War, when the U.S. Army Air Forces sent out a shocker of a press release announcing they'd recovered a flying disc from a ranch near Roswell. The Roswell incident sparked 70 years of conspiracy theories. Soon after the Roswell incident, and due to a string of flying saucer sightings, the Air Force began a series of systematic studies of unidentified flying objects, starting with Projects Sign in 1947 and Grudge in 1949. According to some researchers, one of the Project Sign's alleged final reports, commonly known as the Estimate of the Situation, openly favored the notion that flying saucers were extraterrestrial in origin. The report has never been released to the public and is probably more mythological than real. Many within UFO circles believe that Sign's closure and replacement with the Project Grudge in 1949 attempted to engage in the active debunking of UFO incidents. By the end of 1951, several high-ranking and very influential U.S. Air Force generals were so dissatisfied with the state of Air Force UFO investigations that they dismantled Project Grudge and initiated its final UFO investigation, the now famous Project Blue Book. The Project Blue Book was initially led by Air Force Captain Edward J. Ruppelt. In nearly 2 decades, it collected more than 12,000 cases and was designed to be a fair and honest look at the UFO situation, succeeding where Sign and Grudge had failed. But where initial intentions may have been good, the project quickly went bad. Strictly speaking, Project Blue Book was formed to determine whether UFOs represented a threat to the nation. Over time, when it was evident that Blue Book was utterly incapable of answering that question, its mission became one of making the UFOs go away. According to some researchers, the number of cases that couldn't be debunked rested somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000. The Project Blue Book investigators were under constant pressure from the top to debunk and explain away all UFO reports that reached their offices. The worst sin one could commit on the Blue Book staff was to mark a case unexplained. For almost 20 years, the Project Blue Book investigated UFO sightings and reports, but in 1968, a product of the Air Force and the University of Colorado, the infamous Condon Report, took the final position that all UFO incidents were human delusion, hoaxes, or had some prosaic explanations. In other words, the UFOs that supposedly posed a risk to national security were nothing more than fantasy. During the project, the Air Force and CIA hired and commissioned the top astronomers, scientists, and experts of those times to become the authorities on the subject of UFOs. These experts appeared on national radio and television and gave the naive, gullible, and patriotic public the myth about UFOs. Astronomer Thornton Page was on a CIA committee that investigated UFO reports in 1952. Its conclusion? No evidence of UFOs. On December 17, 1969, the Secretary of Air Defense announced the closure of Project Blue Book. The official Air Force reply was that there was no cover-up and there were no flying saucers from outer space.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, look right here.
While the closure of Blue Book was intended to be the nail in the phenomenon's coffin, the plan didn't exactly work out the way the Air Force had hoped. The report became embroiled in controversy when a memorandum was released explaining that the report itself had to trick the public into thinking the study was objective, but would ensure that the final and official position is that all UFO incidents were hoaxes, delusion, and human error. Officially, UFOs became the subject of ridicule. It's no wonder academics, professionals, and scientists publicly shy away from the subject. This was to become the greatest story ever denied. But on the positive side, the story isn't over yet. The federal government is being increasingly open of the decades-long investigation of UFOs. Officials admit now they've seen many things they don't understand.
You gave an interview the other day in which you said you've been briefed on unidentified flying objects. Are they real?
Well, I don't want to really get into it too much, but personally, I tend to doubt it. I mean, you have people that swear by it, right? And pilots have come in and they said, and these are pilots that are not pilots that are into that particular world, but we have had people saying that they've seen things. I'm not a believer, but, you know, I guess anything's possible.
We spoke to a government official recently who said the U.S. government had wreckage from a UFO in a facility on an Air Force base. Are you familiar with that?
I haven't heard that, no. I haven't heard that. It has not been within government, has not been a big thing, but I've seen it. I've seen it on your show, but I've seen it. I don't assume it's correct, but, you know, I have an open mind, Tucker.
No, you do, Mr. President. Thank you for that.
Nowadays, you can believe anything, right?
It's absolutely refreshing to get a straight answer from a sitting president on the topic without dodging the question, without making some humorous reference to a science fiction movie. I understand that skepticism, as everyone that started off looking at this within government starts skeptical. But his reference to the briefing that he had is very interesting when he says he doesn't want to get into this. Out of this world, with all the dominating headlines in 2020, the coronavirus pandemic, the election, the new recession, something pretty significant happened. The Pentagon does not talk about mysterious, unidentified flying objects or UFO sightings, but soon government findings will be available for public review. The Office of Naval Intelligence has an unidentified aerial phenomenon task force, and U.S. Senator Marco Rubio is requesting a detailed analysis of their findings. The reveal of both the task force's existence as well as Rubio's data request came at a June 17th Select Committee on Intelligence report. The committee requested that the Director of Naval Intelligence, in consultation with the Secretary of Defense and other agency officials, submit a report that includes potential threats posed by unidentified aerial phenomena, detailed analysis of unidentified aerial phenomena data from the Office of Naval Intelligence, an analysis of FBI data on investigations regarding unidentified aerial phenomena, incidents or patterns that may indicate foreign adversaries may have achieved breakthroughs in aerospace capabilities, The committee is requesting that the report be delivered within 180 days of the signing of the Intelligence Authorization Act for 2021.
Are we alone?
No, look, here's the interesting thing for me about all this, and the reason why I think it's an important topic, okay? And that is we have things flying over our military bases and places where we're conducting military exercises, and we don't know what it is, and it isn't ours. So that's the legitimate question to ask. I would say that, frankly, that if it's something of outside this planet, that might actually be better than the fact that we've seen some technological leap on behalf of the Chinese or the Russians or some other adversary that allows them to conduct this sort of activity. But the bottom line is, if there are things flying over your military bases and you don't know what they are because they're not yours, and they exhibit potentially technologies that you don't have at your own disposal, that to me is a national security risk and one that we should be looking into. And so that's the premise I begin with.
Let's clear this up. Who would be looking into this? And they would be generating some sort of a publicly available report on, you're not using the phrase unidentified flying objects, you have another euphemism for it, unidentified aerial phenomenon, which is not.
I didn't come up with that. That's the one that the military uses internally, and ultimately, you know, that's the one we used. And what we're saying, so the Office of Naval Intelligence, this has impacted the Navy for the most part. I've seen reports on this now for the better part of a decade. Other countries have had similar reports, and so. But for our perspective is, there is someone flying in the airspace that no one else is allowed to fly in, and we don't know who it is, and it isn't something we have. We need to know what that is.
Exist and President Trump knows about it. That's according to Israel's former space security chief. In an interview with an Israeli newspaper, he said the aliens have been waiting until today for humanity to develop and reach a stage where we will understand in general what space and spaceships are. NBC News chief global correspondent Bill Neely explains this one.
Hi, Alison. Well, this is quite a story, and it comes from the man who headed Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years. Chaim Eshed is making the extraordinary claim that the United States and Israel have been in contact with a group of aliens for years, not immigrants, but extraterrestrials. He has called them the Galactic Federation of Aliens, and he says President Trump is aware of the existence of these aliens and had been on the verge of revealing their secrets, he claims, but was asked not to do so by the Federation in order to prevent what he calls mass hysteria. Well, the retired general says the US and Israel have kept it from the public because, quotes, humanity isn't ready and the aliens don't want to reveal themselves until humanity can evolve, he says, and understand what space really is. Well, the good news is that he claims an agreement has been reached between the US government and the aliens, a contract to do experiments here. There's also, he says, a secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives. Now, this former head of a branch of Israel's defense ministry is 87. He was very well respected, at least until now. And he said all this in an interview with an Israeli newspaper in Hebrew, but it's really taken off after parts of it were published in English by the Jerusalem Post today. He says he's come forward now in the hope that his news will be accepted as true. He notes that if he'd made these claims 5 years ago, he would have been hospitalized, but now he says, I've got nothing to lose.
I think we see a lot of issues about this topic all the time where it becomes conspiracized and politically influenced. The other thing is all of this has made us think a lot about government transparency and accountability and the way federal agencies treat topics and information, which is a lot of hiding of things or not talking about things or giving statements that people can't interpret. This doesn't really serve us well. Will national security restrictions prevent any documents related to UFOs from being available and having the final disclosure that everyone wants? Either way, more should be made public to clarify what is known and what is not. thank you for watching, and hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. We really hope you subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified of future releases, just hit the bell button. Leave a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are on all of this and what topics you'd like to explore in our future videos.